Hello, everybody. My name is Ian Kirkpatrick. I'm an author, idiot, and loin streamer, and today we're doing a book review or book discussion for Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. Now, I never had any intentions of reading this book. I knew of its existence, but I didn't intend to read it. And lo and behold, somebody sent it to my P.O. box. So now I am obliged. Well, I was obliged to read it. Obligated? That's the same word, right? So since somebody wanted me to read this, here we are with the gay urge demons, because that's what they are. But before we get started, a couple of things. Number one, if you enjoy what I do here on the channel, please remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Maybe consider a membership if you feel so inclined. Number two, if you would like to be featured on the channel, check out the links down in the description below. The number one way to be featured is through Lemoy, the monthly prompt writing contest, where I give you a prompt. You write a short story using that prompt, and on the first Monday of the month, we bask in your creativity as we did just this last week. I know it wasn't the first Monday of the month, but it was the first Monday video. So rules still apply. We are going to have the last Lemoy of the year coming up in December, and then there won't be a Lemoy in January since y'all are also working on the cringe stories. So we're going to take a break from Lemoy in January. The second way to be featured is if you are an indie author and you have a book out or a book that is coming out. If you submit it to the Fresh Meat feature, that chapter will be read here on the channel to hopefully help more readers find your work. And maybe I'll pick it up to read the whole rest of the book. Maybe somebody else will, but that is my best effort that I can do of sharing so many different things that so many different people are doing that will appeal to a wide variety of people. The third thing is if you would like to check out any of my books, none of them are like Camp Damascus. So if this is your jam, mine may not be, or they could be. You could have broad tastes. But if you would like to check out any of my books, they're available at any of your favorite places to get books, including the local library upon request. My newest novel, Body More Zero, it just came out at the end of October, featuring these two gentlemen right here, brothers fighting a battle of impossible things. That's what I got. Also, they have a band. Like, they get band points. And with that said, let's jump into the story. I'm kind of assuming somebody sent this to me because we read Cuckoo, and this is the other recent book that's come out about a gay conversion camp. So I feel like that's probably why I ended up here, but I don't know. They're not very alike at all. However, I can say at least Jesus' name is said more in this one. God is mentioned more in this one than the other one, where God is mentioned 0 times at the camp. However, this one basically spends 0 time at the camp. So I think that's what pisses me off the most. We got a Necrotown situation here where it is mentioned, but it is hardly in the story. And I can see where this could have been good. I don't like it. If you like this book and you like Chuck Tingle, great on you, but I'm going to tell you where my issues were with the story as we go through it. So our main character, Rose, is with her friend Martina, who we're going to pretend is important, but she's really not important. And she's being told that she has no shadow. This phenomenon happens in Hawaii twice a year, she says. And Rose says that she has a pastime of clocking peculiar things or, studying information, and she clocks peculiars on Martina. Martina mentions that it's like Peter Pan, and Rose thinks of correcting her but stops herself because Christian folk don't like to have their indiscretions pointed out. And, Martina is a Christian just like her, and so you shouldn't point out the hypocrisy or the indiscretions because they'll feel bad. She says reading Peter Pan is an indiscretion. You're not supposed to read Peter Pan if you're a Christian. And she doesn't want to upset Martina. She says that Rose says that she has never read Peter Pan because there's magic in it, and her parents said no to reading it. She's like, wow. And Martina is like, wow, your parents are crazy. So, already we've got a different sort of situation here between the two girls. The two girls continue to their destination. Oh, and it should be said she doesn't want to call out on Martina either because she's also already acknowledging how hot she thinks her friend here is. We should also mention that Rose is 20 years old because her religion has you get pulled out of school for 2 years and then you get held back for 2 years. So you get to be a 20-year-old senior in high school. And apparently nobody thinks that's anything's weird about that, not even the government. The two girls continue to their destination, a lake or body of water, where other kids their age are gathered around and taking turns jumping off a cliff. Martina goes in without pause, and then the other kids encourage Rose to do it. While she's trying to convince herself to jump, she sees this creepy lady staring at her from over yonder. It's the gay urge demon I was warning you about, and she just tries to ignore it. Once she finally jumps, she feels like she's had a good memory. She's made a good memory and a unique memory, a necessary memory to her childhood, and she just comes alive. She's got this support from her friend Isaiah, who has always been this great source of Christian companionship, and she appreciates him. He's driving her home and keeps looking in her direction. Rose is sure that he keeps doing this because he wants to say something or ask something, but he keeps providing her with these little gestures, like giving her heat in the car, walking her up the path of the house, and standing there awkwardly staring, thinking about if he wants to say any things. You know what this is leading up to. That's right, it's a smooch. He kisses her, she rejects him. He leaves, but not without punching his car out of anger and masculinity and putting that car in its place. And then he gets in. Rose goes inside, hugs her parents, adores them, mentions that her dad looks like Superman, though she's never read any Superman books because, of course, she's a good Christian that doesn't read any Superman. And who would even need to go for stuff like Peter Pan or Superman when Jesus Christ is the only true superhero, and that's what she's got. This book reads like it is taking its ideas from Christianity, from the Hallmark Channel, and from cults. Like, one of the things that you'll notice as we go through the book, or if you've read the book, it just takes like all kinds of Christian iconography or different denominational practices and mushes them all together to make kind of an amalgamation of all of them, which really doesn't work at all if you're trying to critique religion, at least in my opinion, because the denominations are so incredibly different, especially if we're talking about Catholicism versus any of the variations of Protestantism. Let's be real, there are like over 1,000 different versions of Protestantism in the United States. Different ones have different problems. And you've got the cults, and you've got the offshoots of other things that are Christian adjacent, but they're not really considered Christian by the Christian church. And then you have Orthodox, and they're just all very different. Even the minute rules of like cross versus crucifix, and some churches do 0 instruments with their music, and some have like the punk kind of rock music. I know one of the churches that I went to as a kid, our band leader would change the style of the music. So we do the same kind of songs every week. I mean, he would rotate them, but he would change them around, do that version of rock, do this version as a reggae, do this version as a ballad, and he would just play with the styles of the songs. But there are many churches that wouldn't. And I think when you're trying to do a satire specifically, you need to have a certain thing in mind so that you can actually understand it and then play with the ideas of it, instead of this amalgamation of an idea that is just all Christian religion, period. Because what this actually ended up feeling like was that it was not grounded in the society or the world building that it had or lacked, but it more felt like the author didn't care about Christianity because they just wanted to make a straw man about Christianity. And so then they didn't do any studying, any research, because that felt like a wasted amount of time, and they didn't care to build any sort of believability that grounds this religion in this world, And it's something that I talk about all the time with the believability of a story, is you just have to actually invest in your own story. But I think it is very difficult to tell a compelling story if you hate the subject so much that you don't want to spend any time understanding it. And that includes stories where you're just doing a bad guy, where you absolutely hate the bad guy and have turned the main villain of your story into an amalgamation of everything that you hate or everything that is bad. So then they're a sexist and a racist and a pedophile and a sex offender in other of adults as well. And it's just all of the bad things with no reason behind it. It's you need to understand how something functions. And everything introduced about the religion in the story makes it a non-functioning thing. That just drew me out of the story because it just felt like the author didn't care. And there are other things about this that it feels like the author didn't care about. It's not that hard. Anyway, quote, "We head inside, and I immediately find myself bathed in spiritual warmth, a cozy sensation that causes the ice in my veins to melt away. That lingering chill has finally taken its leave, disappearing with such little fanfare that I hardly remember it was there in the first place." What does any of that mean? It doesn't mean anything. It's a generic statement to be like, look, Christian energy, tee hee hee hee, ha 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 ha. And it makes me think of the people who go, oh yeah, you say that you're a Christian? Well, why do you still sin then? Bazinga! 1 point for atheists, because you're not a perfect person. I get that this author writes outrageous satire. I mean, how can you write about your bum doing you in the bum? But I can only hope that there is something deeper here in this than a very minor attempt of Gretchen's same shallow expression of Christianity, because that's all that I ever see in books like this, or that use the angel and demon lore without actually defining anything beyond demons good, God bad, like Something So Lovely from the last book review. The family prays over their food and begin eating. I'm already noticing how it's switching back and forth randomly between calling her mother Mom and calling her Lisa. And I don't understand why this is happening in a first-person narrative or how this wasn't caught by traditional editors, because something to know about this book is it was one of Chuck Tingle's traditionally published books that was done more recently. So how did an editor not catch in this first person narrative when it goes between Lisa and Mom in the same sentence, in the same paragraph? Because your character would be consistent in what they call their mom. You get a reference to the four tenets, which leads this into being something feeling more orthodox or closer to more cultish things rather than the smorgasbord that is non-denominational or Protestant Christianity. Quote, 1. Respect. I will honor when I do not understand. 2. Integrity. I will believe when I do not witness. 3. Service. I will strive when my sin is heavy. 4. Excellence. I will persevere when my body does not. So it looks like we may be dealing with a story of a generic made-up cult offshoot, which, in my opinion, weakens the idea of satire, because a majority of us agree that cults are bad. It also makes me think of how like Guns and Smoke wanted to call itself a Western without being called inaccurate, so they made it apocalyptic with nothing really apocalyptic about it. The parents ask how the date with Isaiah went, and then they seem alarmed when Rose isn't attracted to him. Quote, we all love Jesus in the Darling household, but my parents are typically the ones who hoist this flag the highest and elevate my faith on a daily basis. I'm thankful to have two spiritual warriors consistently by my side, and through their pious diligence, I've come to carry my own innate parental severity. The idea of them actually encouraging me to have a boyfriend is shocking. I suppose that my recent 20th birthday could be the marker that set them off, but the turn that they've taken is so alarming, I'm left wondering if it's a trap. She says that she wants to be focused on school, but her parents are somehow surprised by this revelation when apparently they've been telling her to stay away from boys all of this time. Quote, honey, she begins, the Lord wants you to start a family. You're a woman now, and finding a partner is a very important part of his plan. I know that we've been a little strict about this before, but you should know that it's okay. You'd think that if finding a partner was a big thing for them, that it's what she needed to do as part of her existence, and it ties in with their faith, then it would have been highlighted more on how she was brought up instead of, I know that we've been strict with boys before. Like, no, you set her up as a child to raise her alongside Isaiah, so she is ready to go into that step with Isaiah because you think it's so important. Like, this is something I've talked about in other book reviews and in other stories where you need to consider what is happening off the page that creates these expectations on the culture and the style that is all visible on the page. You know, it's the part of the iceberg you don't see, but it all makes sense because you can see it operating through the behaviors and beliefs of the characters as it continually goes through. If they showed that, her school was secondary, which also doesn't matter because she's 2 years behind, whatever, and it's not her 20th birthday that struck them up, but the fact that she's about to graduate high school and they don't want her to go to college because they think college is stupid and she should be a wife, that would make more sense. It would have showed the values better, and it would have showed if she was following those values or deviating from those values by saying, you know what, you've been raising me and saying I should get married, but I think I want to go to college. That would show the deviation. I also want to say the beginning of this book where she was walking with her friend made her seem way younger than 20. Like, the voice of this is teenager. And it's one of the things that confused me throughout this, where it felt like it's saying that it was her 20th birthday, but not telling us that she was still in high school was a very confusing thing, along with the voice being very young, because it made it feel like there was this change in the story during editing and they didn't catch all the errors because it doesn't tell you that she's still in high school and was held back for 2 years until later in the story. Rose's parents are alarmed in her lack of interest in Isaiah, and she is confused by this, chokes on something, and ends up spitting up a bunch of bugs on her spaghetti. She's confused by what all is going on. Quote, "When this ejection finally stops, I stare down in utter horror, my body trembling as my mind races to understand the bizarre squirming mass that's now heaped onto my pasta and scattered across the table. This black bile is churning and moving, crawling over itself as tiny wings flutter and a miniature legs kick in the air. I scream as I realize this is not some toxic liquid, but a dark porridge of living creatures, little flies born deep within my body before their sudden expulsion." The parents tell her everything is going to be okay, and she asks if she should go to the doctor after that, and her parents pretty much ignore her. All of a sudden, she's saying she's been cold, which we haven't seen in previous chapters. Again, it's something that should come up. She should have been cold in the car with Isaiah. She should have been cold when she got out of the water. Like, we should see these things before it is relevant to the story. For me, this expresses novice writing without, like, you're not thinking forward. And you don't have to think of them when you're drafting it the first time, but when you're doing a revision going through, you should be like, okay, she's going to say that she's cold at this point, which means, and that she's been cold all day, which means I should add in little things of her shivering in this earlier part to sort of telegraph that it's coming later. Those are all parts of revision, which then when this happens, I'm like, it feels like there wasn't a revision. The dad says that he's not feeling spaghetti anymore because of all of the stuff, just bug blahs all over the table, but how about they get a pizza instead? Surprised the man has an appetite at all. They also don't find her having spewed a bunch of stuff to be concerning at all, so they might be on the know of what's going on. That's your first hint, but I still don't see why she wouldn't, like, push for a doctor. Back in her room, Rose looks up info on why or how bugs might grow in your stomach. Quote, "Over the course of the last hour, I've gone from anxious and worried to deeply fascinated, consumed by a flood of information regarding common Hexagemia limbate. While the average housefly has a lifespan of a month, a Hexagemia limbate experiences an entire lifetime over the course of a single day. That being said, their larval stage lasts much, much longer. If I were to swallow enough larvae to at precisely the right time, then maybe I'd find myself in the situation like the one I've just experienced over dinner." After she sees the gay urge demon once more outside of her window, her dad comes in, interrupting her studies, and says, quote, "My father lets out a long sigh and casually crosses the threshold of my room, sauntering over to my bed and perching on the edge. 'You're a very smart girl,' Dad offers. 'You're also very curious.' I already know where this is headed, and I brace myself for the same conversation we've been having for years. Intelligence is a virtue, but curiosity is something else. You know, the Lord doesn't ask much of us," Dad continues. "The Bible tells of great sacrifice, but I'm not Abraham and you're not Ruth. We're on easy street. We don't have to pay money to walk in his shadow. We don't have to abandon our families. All we have to do is have faith, real faith." I know, I reply. "I will believe when I do not witness." Tenant number 2. "You know, honey, sometimes I'm not so sure you will," my father continues, a great weight in his tone. "Seems to me you've been up here all night reading about fruit flies instead of trusting his plan. It's good to be thoughtful, but when the desire for more knowledge takes over your life, what you're really saying is, even in the presence of God's light, I'm not full. Do you understand?" Dad continues. "It's a sin, hun. That feeling you call curiosity is fine in small doses, but when you turn it into a habit, it becomes gluttonous. A hunger for knowledge is still hunger." See, it's another thing that would have made her graduating high school and then rejecting the idea of getting married actually better for this too, because that could still be considered the thirst for knowledge or the hunger for knowledge and then be criticized for it as well. And following through on that theme or that core belief of the cult. Dad takes her computer away, saying that she's been on it for too long, and when she's in her room later, she realizes that there is no door on the hinges, and she says she thought she had a door before. Dad says no, there was never a door, and also we get more of this annoying thing with how did the editor not fix it? Quote, Luke's good-natured demeanor falters. My father removes his glasses and rubs the ridges of his nose for a moment, clearly frustrated. Luke and my father are the same person. You wouldn't guess it from that. Since Rose doesn't fully trust that there was never a door there, she's invited to check her door frame to see if there was anything that was covering up a possible door that used to be there, but she doesn't see anything that would identify that there used to be a door there. She keeps doing her research in her room on her phone because her dad didn't realize that phones have internet now, which is something I also have an issue with. Quote, the next search result in a local story about a man who claims that he discovered a new species of leech in the deep Neverton County woods. A photo is included showing a clearly fabricated invertebrate that is nothing more than a pale, sagging balloon wrapped around someone's deflated football. Stringy hair has been pasted along the ridge of the mysterious creature's back. I remember when this story came out and a wave of sadness washes over me. The hoaxer was a deeply disturbed man, a lost soul who would eventually take his own life. He was a non-believer. So the thing that annoys me with the phone, number one, you can still purchase phones that are not smartphones. You can get a little flip phone, a little pay-as-you-go phone. So if her parents don't want her to have access to the internet, they don't have to buy her a smartphone. But this is going off of the idea that her parents are so stupid that they don't even know that there is internet capability on a smartphone when they're paying for internet capabilities. In fact, you can also just pay for a regular phone plan that doesn't have internet and still have a smartphone but not have internet. So it really doesn't make sense to me with how controlling they are that one, they would even get her the fancier, more expensive phone, because why spend that money? Just get her the cheaper phone that does exactly what it needs to do. And two, assuming that her parents were there when they got the phone, then he would have talked to the phone sellers and been like, this is what we need a phone for. And it would not have been the smartphone. She also gets a notification on her secret social media account that she's been tagged in photos from that day with Martina. So she's got all access, but never went out of the way to read Peter Pan or Superman on her cell phone when she obviously can. Not that you have to, but this book has this weird mix that it's making the main character feel insanely young and in a controlled environment, but only conveniently controlled so that she can also have all the access to this other stuff conveniently. She has no door and she had her laptop taken away, but her parents don't know about her phone or her secret social media accounts where she gets tagged on. She reads insanely young, like end of middle school or early high school, and not a 20-year-old, and maybe that's on purpose because she was held back 2 years, but it didn't read well. It read like a mistake. And then her dad is discouraging knowledge while not specifically discouraging going to college or saying, you need to, you're getting ready to finish high school. It is going to be time to get married. In which case also, because she is 18 years old, why didn't they make her drop out? Because she didn't need to finish and she needed to go and do the plan of whatever tribe this is. Like, you take the kid out of normal school when they're maybe 15 or 14 or whatever, and you send them to the Camp Damascus, the whatever, to get brainwashed as they're budding in their sexuality in the middle of their teenage years. And then they come out and they're 16 or 17 and you let them drop out, or maybe you take them out when they're 16 so that you can take them out when they're 18. And then you just immediately after at Camp Damascus, they get paired with a boy who also went through the situation so that they are on par with each other and they can start dating and then they can get married. That would have made more sense. Them continuing her going to school when she is 20 years old doesn't make sense when you can literally just drop out of school at that point. And her parents are so against her getting knowledge. So it also, and is she going to a secular school? Because I can't remember if she went to a secular school because she has secular friends. Flicking through the pictures, she's checking out Martina and thinking about how attractive she is and also being confused by her emotions. She thinks that she hears a fly and gets up to follow the noise. She goes downstairs where her mother has fallen asleep in front of the TV and we get, quote, in the Darling household, our television options are limited. Temptation comes in many forms, including an overwhelming number of secular channels. They've been blocked with parental controls, leaving us with 4 appropriate networks to choose from, yet she still has a smartphone. It's just having convenient blocks that don't actually stop the character from doing the things, but pretend that there are blocks in the way to make things difficult when they're not. The TV being on with a handful of networks and commercials leads to this, quote, "By now, I know all of the commercials by heart, including the local offerings from our very own Kingdom of Pine Church. The familiar advertisement flashes into view. Pastor Pete Bend strolling calmly across the field of brilliant green grass. Behind him, several rows of stark white cabins stretch along the edge of the forest, and behind these is a metal flagpole hoisting a massive American flag. The site is immaculate and clean, fresh paint and tightly cut lawns immediately letting the viewer know that this is more than just another cozy summer camp. A 1-800 number appears at the bottom of the screen, and it remains there for an entire duration of the commercial. It's a bit excessive, but it's also good marketing, and I'd remiss to say the Kingdom of Pine doesn't know how to market themselves. It's what the church was founded on. For all have sinned and come short of the glory of God," Pastor Bend offers in a casual, direct-to-camera speech. "In other words, nobody's perfect. We've been blessed by the Lord to walk in the sun on this beautiful day and smell the fresh Montana air, but what do we do with this blessing is up to us." This turns into an "if you're worried that you're gay, come to this camp." It pisses me off because the story has done nothing to set this up, establish or build a relationship or idea of lust between Martina and Rose and her fear. It had her look at those pictures on Facebook for like 2 seconds and then think that her tummy is all rumbly and OMG, what does that mean? And then she gets up. There is no tension. There is no fear. This needs more setup to pit Isaiah versus Martina against each other and to build this panic in Rose to make it urgent and build the bugs so that they're relevant or related. But this is just a rush to get to things where it doesn't give a frick about the setup. So something that actually could have made more sense, and this is going back to my previous thing of like pull them out when they're 16 or at 18 when they can go and get married to each other. Isaiah and Rose could have already been engaged because they went to camp at the same time. They were kind of brainwashed at the same time. Their demon gay urges know each other or something. Or Isaiah was never gay, and so they just send the gay ones to the camp and then hook them up with somebody from the church, whether they're gay or not. And so then you've got these two together, and then Isaiah is having his birthday party as usual. And so she goes to the birthday party, and Martina is there, and she's checking out Martina. And so now she's got this conflict because she's supposed to be in love with her fiance, but she's also having these feelings for Martina. You could have mixed in a little bit of, but you could have mixed in a little bit of the kind of sort of conflict that's in, but I'm a cheerleader. And so then it would have been much thicker. And, but I'm a cheerleader is also still a comedy. So it could have still fit with this feeling, and it would have built the tension, and it would have built a more believable situation based on this, as opposed to somebody being pulled out of school for 2 years and now being a senior in high school who is 20 years old. It further says, quote, "Behind me are more than 300 Camp Damascus graduates, but over the last 13 years, we've helped thousands of young people go on to lead healthy, normal, heterosexual lives in the presence of God," he passionately explains. "The facts speak for themselves. We are the most effective ex-gay ministry on the planet, boasting a 100% success rate. In the long history of Camp Damascus, there has not been a single reversion to same-sex attraction." I find that hard to believe. The screen fades to a long, slow pan across the bleachers, prompting me to recognize a few notable faces from my own high school mixed in with others from across the globe. This is the only issue that I have with this commercial. With a 100% success rate, there's no need to hire actors, yet the handful of acquaintances who ended up in this crowd shot claim that they never went to Camp Damascus. A few of them did actually go, but when I prod about what it was like to shoot this commercial, they always have trouble finding the words. It must have been amazing. So call the number below and begin to process the embracing a better life for you and someone you love, Pastor Bend announces confidently. With a little help, every one of us can. He pauses for a moment as the whole camp joins in the ruckus cheer. "Love right," they cry in unison. So it also doesn't make sense that this would include this brainwashing or this like mental block, and then use the same people with the mental block in the commercial, because now that's just going to create an issue with them where they're like, wait a second, I was in that commercial. What happened? Why don't I remember? It's a bad choice. And it seems like it feels like it is just meant to add this tension to it. Like, oh, they can't answer questions about their time there. But it should just be like the Stepford Wives, where they just have an answer because it's pre-programmed in there, or they still remember because, like, you're already using the technology that we're going to get later in this. Just have the gay demon urge be planting memories in their head of Camp Damascus while they're in there anyway. After the commercial ends, quote, the commercial fades to black and my mother's late-night program returns to the screen. An hour of preaching from an ultra-liberal California pastor that she probably shouldn't be watching but tunes in after Dad's gone to bed. So does she cancel the parental blocks? Is Dad not watching to see what channels are on there? And also, why is there this random commercial for this gay conversion camp during the ultra-liberal California pastor event? Because these two seem counterintuitive to one another. But it also is obviously, in my opinion, flagging that the mother is going to be on the daughter's side because the mother disagrees with the dad. So this is just kind of flagging you that she's going to get help from mom later, but the setup of the commercial with the television just doesn't make sense to me. Maybe it makes sense to you because you're trying to get the ultra-liberal California cultists who are watching this to give in to the love right spiel, but there's nothing in that spiel that would convince anybody to change their mind if they were watching this program with the ultra-liberal pastor. Now on cue, she randomly needs to think about being with a girl in a diner and then just keeps going on that thought. The gay urge demon appears and runs into the closet. Why does she run into the closet? I don't know. You would think that she would run up to Rose and like slap the gay out of Rose or something. She just runs into the closet to give Rose a little bit of a spook because the gay urge demon is also not actually a threat, not actually an obstacle, not actually going to put anybody in danger. So she just kind of when they need a spook. Until there is a worthy target to attack. But, you know, Rose is over here daydreaming with the gay urges. So do something, you dumb demon. Also, let's take a moment to appreciate this stunning metaphor of a woman running into the closet and hiding after Rose has a mild gay thought and watched a gay camp conversion commercial. Rose screams after seeing the woman. Her mother wakes up, Dad comes in, stops in his tracks for the 4th or 5th time in the last 40 pages. She says this weirdo ring-looking woman just ran into the closet, and so Dad checks the closet and nothing is there, and he has to kneel in front of her and be eye to eye. I'm wondering how small she is if he has to kneel to get to her eye level. Dad says that it's been a rough night and she is tired. I guess that he is still not worried about her vomiting up a bunch of bugs at lunch and then having hallucinations. Also, you would think that because he was part of putting the gay urge demon inside of her, that he would recognize the description of the gay urge demon, maybe. On top of this, we have more great similes from this genius. Quote, my first instinct is to protest, to tell him that I'm perfectly fine and that strange woman must have slipped past him somehow. But the words won't form. Instead, I start crying again, even harder than before as I allow the feelings to sweep me away like Noah's Ark. So, parents don't respond to the teen having a breakdown, vomiting bugs, and seeing things. And we have yet another main character, particularly female, who can't do the bare minimum of speaking for plot reasons, so nothing happens. Other thing is, if they're seeing this happening with their daughter, then maybe they might be a little bit suspicious that their gay conversion is not working on their daughter, that it is falling out. And it's one of the reasons why I doubt that there is a 100% success rate for Camp Damascus, though obviously that's a commercial, so it's going to probably lie about the numbers because they want to get more clients. But I will give it that. I will just allow the pastor to be a liar because obviously he's not a great person. Instead of taking Rose to the doctor, she's told to go to the therapist, and I'm sure he can help her with the bugs. The therapist is a weirdo who calls her honey, which should be a red flag to everyone. It's not because he's a bad guy and they're all connected, so it doesn't really matter. The dude asks her if she thinks the woman was real, and she says that she's not a child anymore. The dude asks her if she thinks that the woman was real, and then says that she's not a child anymore. She shouldn't believe in such things. And she says, quote, I know, but what about the flies? Something strange is going on. Swallowing that much insect larva is a medical emergency. It could cause someone a lot of stress, and stress is no good, Dr. Smith continues. So this man recognizes that was a medical emergency, but doesn't ask if she was taken to the hospital, doesn't ask what her parents did next, doesn't check on anything, and just moves on. Especially, okay, now we got this question of why isn't he doing something of it? Because he knows what the larvae are, and he is one of the people that programs the demons to tick on these people. So why isn't she being taken to immediate services that are within the church grounds so that she can be reprogrammed? Because she's showing signs of the programming breaking. And she's at this guy. He knows. He knows what's going on. Rose asks if the thing could have been a demon. The therapist goes, demons are real, but they manifest through sin. Have you been having sinful thoughts? He then mentions Pavlov's dogs, getting the name wrong so that Rose can, of course, correct him, and he ignores it. And he goes, God is ringing a sin bell at you right now, and if you ignore it, you're going to die and go to hell. So don't ignore that ringing bell. The therapist then tells her what he thinks she needs is time to de-stress. Go be a teenager with Isaiah because everyone knows that teens have sex, lol. So go and have fun with Izzy at his birthday party, winky face. Everyone will understand. The guy is so creepy, inappropriate, and insanely predatory. Again, it also gives a good reason for them to actually be like fiancés or something, or to be in a serious relationship where Isaiah could then propose to her at his party to try to move things along because the brainwashing is breaking. So now it's time to go into this Nito house party, and she's all of a sudden wanting to go and tell herself that she should be happy because secular kids will also be there, and she is lucky to get to go to a mixed party. With her parents being as constructive as they are, and they're basically living in a cult, why does she get to go to a party of mixed secular and cultists? Because the secular kids are going to do things that are going to break whatever the goal of this cult is, which, spoiler alert, we never really get a background on this cult. We never get any ideas of what this cult is trying to do, what their main goal is. And I think that's because it's supposed to be a satire on just like all Christian denominations, period. So it's just trying to say that they are all homophobic, and so it doesn't really matter. So they don't have a goal. It is just salvation is the goal. But it doesn't even say salvation is the goal. It doesn't even say that God doesn't care if you're happy. He wants you to be holy. It doesn't go anywhere near that. So you don't have what is driving this. And it's especially dumb because you have this cult that is using science to enslave demons, to put gay urge demons on the gay kids to scare the gay away. So how are they justifying using demons to stop sin? We needed more background on what the frick this cult was, but we don't get any of it because there's no investment in any of this, and it just feels like the author, one, picked a pet project that they freaking hate, which is Christianity, religion, whatever. They don't care. They just demonize it, and then didn't want to do research, didn't want to world build. And yes, even if you set it in the real world, you still need to world build the societies, the corporations, the businesses, the religions that you're using in order to ground it. To kind of continue on that rant, the setup of the party has zero details. Quote, music is blasting from a nearby stereo, and fellow students struggle to shout over it as they lean casually against the wall or laugh together in small pods. Any observer might see this as a quintessential teenage party scene, but a careful eye reveals assorted crucifix jewelry and t-shirts sporting various God-centric catchphrases. Couldn't even bother with a God is good across or Jesus is my homie, or like literally anything to give it grounding, to give it a feeling of existing. It's just like a generic. Also, should be a little bit of research into this as to like which denominations use crucifixes versus crosses, because there is a difference, and then just mixing everything together really doesn't make sense. After a brief, awkward walk into the entry and talk between Isaiah and Rose, he takes her into the basement to go and play, guess what? The favorite game of horror books and horror shows, Truth or Dare, where she is asked how many times she has had sex, of course, but don't worry, it skipped over building the relationship between Rose and any of these kids and what her classmates think of her, or even what their questions or dares were, because the book doesn't give a crap. It's here that we learn that Rose is actually a 20-year-old high school student, because they said that all of the kids who are in the kingdom or whatever are 2 years older, so arbitrarily held back. It feels insane that they have these huge swaths of 20-year-olds in this class with other 17-year-olds when So I run into this, I think, all the time, and maybe it's obviously different in different states depending on what sort of homeschooling you do. But I had to take the California Achievement Test every year to prove that my parents were not just ignoring school standards. And those California achievement tests, I lived in Washington State. The California Achievement Test was one of the many tests that you could do if you were homeschooled to prove that you were learning and to show your benchmarks, and those had to be sent to the state to prove that you were teaching your children. So arbitrarily, these kids are pulled out of school, I think in middle school or something. Maybe it didn't say when they're pulled out, but they're pulled out, kept back arbitrarily for 2 years, and then put back in with peers who are 2 years younger than them. They don't learn anything. You'd think if this church wants to continue, one, to operate, and two, sell their services globally, then they would have a way to continue education, basic generic education, so the kids wouldn't fall behind, they wouldn't stand out, and there would be no loss to the parents who have their kids go into this thing. But instead, you're screwing the kids by making them stand behind. And so again, it just feels like almost a hit job on anything that is Christian, because now it's saying they fall behind. Also, wouldn't this kind of thing, one, make them a bit socially stunted? Two, wouldn't it change the way that she interacts with others, because wouldn't they be brainwashing them to act a certain way while they're away at this camp for 2 years? And obviously, it's not even every kid that is in this church that goes to the camp and gets pulled out for 2 years or is a part of Kingdom of the Pine. I mean, maybe it is every kid of Kingdom of the Pine, but I guess we don't even ever know if the 2 years where they're pulled out is specifically every kid, or if it is just the gay kids going to Camp Damascus for 2 years. I don't think it ever explains that. She's so quiet for so long that everyone is guessing that she's a virgin because she's a 20-year-old senior, and she's stammering to answer, just starts getting flustered, thinks about making out with a girl and can't answer. They're all like, wow, you don't know if you're a virgin or not? You don't know how many people you've slept with? You've been with that many people? She zones out, watches some scene on a TV of skinless corpses. Apparently there was a TV on while they were playing this game the whole time, and people are surprised that she's not only staring at it, but that no one noticed until that point, and so they're like, who thought that it was funny to put on a terror film? How did no one notice the TV was on and a horror film was playing this whole time? They decided to not wait for Rose to answer. They don't even insult her for being a wet blanket, being unable to answer the freaking question, to move on and instead ask Martina, truth or dare. Martina is then dared to pick somebody that she really likes and then go in the closet with them for a couple of minutes and see what happens. Do these people realize that you can go in the closet and literally nothing happens? I mean, maybe I'm the freak here. I mean, I positively am the freak here, but nothing has to happen with any of these people. Guess it's just assumed that everyone is an animal if given the opportunity, which would not be the first time. Rose is confused why she is feeling feelings about this, about wanting Martina to pick her, quote, I'm flooded by bizarre state of self-awareness, yearning for Martina to choose me, but struggling to accept the context of this desire. The emotions are so powerful that I'm actually trembling, shivering with nervous anticipation. What is it about my friend that I find so utterly fascinating? I want to be near her, but not in a weird way, obviously. It's not like I'm gay or something. I have a hard time believing even this naive 20-year-old doesn't know what attraction or infatuation or crushes feel like. She can at least be in denial of it not being attraction, but her having no idea that it is attraction is bizarre. Martina doesn't pick Rose. She gets upset and just storms out of the room, all while saying she doesn't understand herself. She tries to calm herself down, and the gay urge demon is there too, staring at her. This time, she's got a name tag on her shirt, conveniently, and it says her name is Patchett. If you're wondering why there's a name tag, you'll never find out. The story doesn't answer it. It just puts it there and has them notice it and doesn't answer the question. She just starts screaming, so Rose runs back into the truth or dare room. The demon woman went through the walls into the closet where Rose is, and another scream happens, which results from Martina getting her neck snapped. The closet door opens and everyone is screaming. The body falls out. The person that she went in there with comes out. I'm assuming this is a metaphor for sexual repression and how it literally kills you. Skip forward 2 weeks. No mention of how this death was reported to have happened, if Rose Rose was hallucinating, but I'm assuming Rose was not hallucinating because she is now obsessing over death. Her mother asks if she's okay as Rose is on her phone, and Rose takes a moment to complain, quote, "I scrambled to tuck away my device," which they've made clear is for emergencies only. In any other circumstance, I'd be receiving a hearty taste of parental discipline, but it appears Lisa has momentarily holstered the whip. I don't know why she keeps saying that her mother is the strict person when obviously her mother is more the liberal person and her dad is the stricter person. And again, it's so stupid because her family didn't have to give her a smartphone. She doesn't need this smartphone. She can't have even a little bit of grace for her mother, who is going to be the only person to help her later. Her mother invites her to go for a walk, and she goes. They talk about people cheating in the neighborhood, making up sins that the neighbors are doing because it calms Rose's mind to then retrieve memory verses of advice to give to the people for their sins, which then Mom comforts her at the end. Now at the therapist office once again, she's questioning the security that she feels with him and how secure her life actually is. She asks about the plaques on his wall since she's never asked about them before, despite being curious by nature person and seeing this guy for years. Amazing how coincidental that is. I don't buy that she's never looked at them before. It's just a convenience, just to show off that he's part of the Camp Damascus thing for 10 years since we just saw the commercial. Like, you can tell that this thing isn't trying very hard to bury Camp Damascus lore into Montana, which is also really dumb since it is apparently such a big thing that it builds the economy of this entire area. Now, if you know my writing, you know how I like to make locations have their own personality and to build the personality of those locations. And this book doesn't even try. It just kind of throws a thing in there, and there's nothing about this that makes it Montana. There's nothing about this that even builds Camp Damascus into the culture of the area, where it wants to tell you that people send their kids from all over the world. Camp Damascus is like Disneyland in Montana, but for gay kids whose parents want them to have gay urge demons to follow them around for the rest of their lives. Now, you could have done something really cool with this. You could have really built this into this really creepy thing. You know, like, it's a small world after all, creepy vibes in this place. But we don't even get that. We don't have, like, the gift shop for Camp Damascus. We don't have anything. She randomly decides to yell at the doctor that she's angry and saw her friend die 2 weeks ago. You would think that, hey, how are you doing since your friend's death would be a recurring thing that they would be asking at this point. And you would think that we would also maybe get a little more information on Martina's death, but don't hold your breath. You'd die. When she's yelling at her therapist, she also starts getting on him for saying that you told me that demons don't exist. He clarifies that what he said was that demons do exist, but they don't look the way that you think they would look. And then we learn that apparently Kingdom of the Pines, we don't know if it's a school, a community, a church. I'm assuming it's a church, but it never clarifies what Kingdom of the Pines actually is, because, you know, the kids get pulled out of Kingdom of the Pine, because the kids get pulled out of normal school to, if they're Kingdom of the Pine kids, to go to Kingdom of the Pine whatever for its 2-year whatever. I don't know. Told that Kingdom of the Pines is funding the lawsuit against Parker for killing Marina, because Parker is the kid that was in the closet with Marina when she died. It is so bizarre because we're talking about a criminal case here, a murder. Prosecution in a murder trial, you don't have to pay for a family to pursue. This is a criminal trial, not a civil trial, so you don't have to privately fund it. The city is going to, or the state is going to, investigate the murder and charge him with murder if they have enough evidence. So I don't understand what the church is really paying for. She asks if the doctor knows anything about a demon named Patchett, and, quote, Dr. Smith hesitates. The moment is so slight that it barely registers. He's been working a long time because he's darn good at his job, but I'm beginning to wonder what Dr. Smith's job actually is. The fact that she's come to him for years and this is all of a sudden is so stupid. Everything is convenient where it just tells you what this is and how things are, with no backing based on how the characters interact or the society around it. It seems that the doctor knows something about Patchett and questions why Rose is reading unholy books like the one Patchett is from, and then he starts yelling when he's questioned, quote, "Why are you reading it?" he asked. "You're filling your mind with these satanic diatribes, and you wonder why your guilt has manifested as imaginary demons? My guilt? I shout. Over what? Over sin! Dr. Smith bellows, finally losing his cool as his face turns red and he lunges forward in his chair, unleashing the words like a holy tidal wave. I read these books because it is my duty to God, Rose. Do you understand? These texts are not meant for the impressionable minds of curious little girls who think they understand the world, but know absolutely nothing. Side note, I absolutely hate this trope where any small push against someone who is considered an antagonist or against the main character causes them to scream as if they are bad and they have no control over themselves. This guy is supposed to be a professional. He deals with troubled teens. He deals with adults. He is manipulative. He should not be losing his mind over this, because what that actually shows is that Rose is in the power position and this guy knows nothing. And it is such a weak writing thing that so many people do. It's like somebody calls somebody a racist in a book and they lose their mind and they're like, I'm not a racist. You're a bad person. Blah! They go on this diatribe of losing their freaking mind. And it's just the weakest way to write an antagonist. It's also something that makes it feel childish. This guy, also being theoretically a therapist for at least a decade, should have a better control over his emotions or no job in the field. And I get that you can have your fallible characters, but if this is going to be your big bad, and this guy is your big bad, do better. Because there is no threat behind this stupid character. And now, this isn't a horror book. This isn't a horror comedy. This is wish fulfillment garbage. Rose is obsessively looking into Patchett and does so under the guise of mourning in silence and prayer. This is with her phone as she's sitting in her room quietly. Dr. Smith keeps knowing things that he shouldn't, like what Patchett looks like, and Rose is getting sussy of him. Dr. Smith then gives her sugar pills that she pretends not to know what they are. She leaves the office, listens to Jesus songs on the radio that sound like romance songs, as if that South Park didn't do that 15 years ago, and then she feels like she's seeing through everything now for the first time and starts struggling with her identity. Quote, I've always been wise for my age, and part of that wisdom came from having a profound sense of who I was and what I liked. I understood my place in the world. I was a daughter, an American, a member of the congregation. I played soccer and loved brownies. I was curious and full of joy. I was excited to try new things, and I had a past, present, and very specific future laid out for me. I was committed to the Lord. Some of these things are still true, of course, but as more and more of my characteristics fall into question, I find myself testing the relevance of them all. What happens when every identity marker slips away? That right there tells me even more that this should have had it set up that she was engaged to Isaiah, especially even if you wanted to just have her be engaged at the party because he proposed to her then, and like the Dr. Smith, when she went to Dr. Smith before the party, instead of going wink wink nudge nudge, kids your age always have sex, instead of doing that, how about sticking with the idea of what this congregation is apparently curing these kids of, trying to make them at least reach for salvation by not sinning, and have her be like, something special might happen to you at the party tonight. You might get some incredible news. Something amazing might happen. And that's because he knows that Isaiah is going to propose. And that she has been prepared for this all of this time. But instead, it acts like when she's having her discussion with her parents earlier and she's talking about going to college, and her parents are like, well, no, knowledge is bad. She doesn't seem like she has her future already lined up for her. We don't know what her future is, but we already know that from the beginning of this, she's already not in line with her parents, not in line with the church, because I don't think that this author can actually commit to having a character be and act in a way that, like a protagonist, be and act in a way that is antithetical to their own beliefs, that he couldn't let Rose just be in this committed relationship with Isaiah, or actually believe in this church, or build this church to be believable to readers. It had to all be just like garbage, with this character already starting out breaking away from the Truman Show she's supposed to live in. Which means it's this whole thing is stupid. On the way home, she sees a girl in the park drinking a beer who looks familiar and approaches. The chick is rude. On the way home, she sees a girl in the park drinking a beer and who looks familiar, so Rose approaches her. The chick is rude and tells her to go away. Rose returns to her car and cries, and while sitting there, the girl randomly appears and apologizes for the way that she acted. Rose asks her what her name is, and the girl goes, "No, I can't tell you. You really don't remember, do you? They did a number on you. Wow. Well, I can't tell you anything, but they got targets on us. But I love you." I don't think this makes any sense either, because is she, one, secular, so she didn't end up at Camp Damascus? Two, how does that even matter? Because if she lives in this community where the community is funded by the economy at Camp Damascus, how did she not also get sent in? Doesn't she also have a gay urge demon that is following her around? Because then it's, oh, they did a number on you. Okay, but they didn't do a number on her? Or did she actually go to Camp Damascus? I can't remember at this point. It's been a couple weeks since I read it as I'm recording this. And she escaped, and she remembers, but she still has the gay urge demon on her. Anyway, after the girl says, I love you, bugs fly out of her mouth, and she runs off to save herself. So that confirms that she was at the camp. Apparently, they didn't do a number on her. Why not? Did she not get the normal treatment? I also guess that she lied about not being able to say anything because she says, I can't say anything, but, you know, they did a number on you and I love you. Okay, immediately cross what you already said. Rose is very confused and then just continues home. She turns down on a street on her way and she sees this demon standing in the middle of the road. Now her brain goes, I should try to run over that demon. So she does, and she phases right through the demon and crashes her car into the side of like a building or something. Eventually, the demon does follow her over and she fights the demon, and she eventually somehow traps the demon in the car, locks the doors, and it burns to death. So forget that previously it phased through the car. Once it's on the inside, it apparently can't phase through to get on the outside of the freaking car. She is also badly damaged and gets picked up by emergency vehicles, where you get this bizarre way of writing where she's unconscious, observing what's happening to her, saying that it's a memory, just to say that there are machines and Bibles and Dr. Smith, the therapist, doing rituals on her. We really didn't need this perspective of her projecting herself out, and it took me back to Handbook for Mortals, where the main character of that was also unconscious, but she astro projected herself out to describe what everybody was doing while she was unconscious, because the author couldn't figure out a way to just reveal this information in a different sense when you're writing a first-person narrative. Pisses me off. If you can't use the first-person narrative the way it's supposed to be used, like, maybe don't use it, because this is just amateurish. It's lazy. It makes me more irritated than it probably should, because my opinion on this book really doesn't freaking matter. Chuck Tingle is more successful than I will likely ever be, but it still makes me so irritated. During this time, we also get this quote that I feel like I needed to add. Remembering this is nothing more than a memory. I am fascinated by the sheer amount of detail. Detail that can't possibly be accurate. While I have faith in the broad strokes my brain is painting, there's no way that I could remember these long coordinates. My mind is just filling in the blanks to conjure a coherent picture. Aside from, like, in general, that quote, I would like to bring attention specifically to the first sentence, which is, remembering this is nothing more than a memory. Remembering is a memory. Yes. When she wakes up, her parents ask her what happened, and she doesn't really have an answer. They seem to be looking for something specific in her answer, and she also goes on to further judge her parents, and she also says she knows whatever her dad says is a lie. There's not a single thing this character doesn't seem to know about anyone. Everything she knows, and she also outsmarts everybody. She also doesn't understand why anyone from the congregation was at the crash site looking into things. She avoids telling them that she knew that there was a demon body in the wreckage, and because she doesn't know what'll happen if she does. I don't know how to take this, because we got nothing on the whole Parker snapping Marina's neck situation. It's all good in the hood. The chapter ends on this quote. My mother smiles. You were under for hours. We're just so glad to have you back. But I'm not back. They don't realize it yet, but I'm a completely different person. She's in the hospital now, recovering, getting to eat whatever she wants, but she doesn't have her phone. She's just going through her head about the demon situation and how to get rid of it. Quote, as I continue to bob and weave through the bizarre verbal tests, it becomes very clear that the word temptation holds extra weight. Every interviewer will reach this part of the process and hesitate for a moment, their eyes struggling to convey something the rest of their body is clearly not entirely comfortable with. So she's traveling out to the vending machines to get a snack with what money from her family, I don't know, since it doesn't really seem like they're giving her money or even an allowance. But that doesn't even come into play, it's just magic. While trying to decide, she sees a TV in another patient's room. Sans patients, apparently, the TV's just on and she walks in. Described as, quote, "The first thing I notice is the woman on screen is absolutely gorgeous, yet casually dressed with large round glasses covering her eyes. She looks disheveled and sports very little makeup, especially for what appears to be a large-scale secular Hollywood film. Her eyes are giant, and the second I see them, I feel a cold gust wash across my skin. The two women on the screen then kiss, and Rose is immediately having an awooga moment. She goes back to her room, turns on the TV, and flickers through the channels. Quote, I witness all the secular television has to offer. On one channel, there's a troop of muscular men in the jungle, huddled around their wounded companion as some frightening parasite crawls beneath his skin. The next channel features two special agents kicking open a door to reveal an inhumanly tall woman with two pupils in each eye. She stands over dozens of crumbly bodies. Ugh, I flirt, flipping through the channels a little faster. Secular media is frightening. Feels a bit of an exaggeration, but okay. She keeps going until she finds the channel where the two women are kissing. Quote, I watched intently, the chill gradually returning to my body as I allow this strange feeling to overtake me. I'm terrified of what it might mean if my theory is correct, but fear is not the only emotion lurking within. I'm hoping to remain objective, to experience these sensations and categorize them in a way that fits, yet the real tension comes from an obvious truth looming large, staring me in the face and waiting for me to accept it. My eyes are transfixed on the television couple, and while their physical presence is just fine, the story they're telling makes me ache in a pulpy, scintillating way. There's no question about it. This is the temptation I was warned about. It's true. She's been diagnosed with terminal lesbianitis. I'm sorry. The cootie shot will not work here. After getting excited sexually, she sees the gay urge demon staring at her. You think those two actresses on the television are at risk of the lesbian sexual tension death? I'm not sure. Rose turns off the TV and thinks of puppies to fight off the sexual urges. She turns on the TV again and tries to fight her gay thoughts to save herself in fear of the consequences, but her psyche is like, you can't fight it, bro. Women are spicy, curvy even. You know it, I know it, they juicy. We going to suck that juice like we got a free coupon for lifetime supply of juices at Orange Julius. Let's go! And even if you think about the hottest Hottie McHottie male on the planet, you can't be impressed by that piece of meat because you are a juice bitch. Quote, objectively speaking, this imaginary man is very sexy, I guess. He looks like a hunky amalgamation of secular superstar Harry Styles and a specific painting of Jesus that I like. But to be perfectly honest with myself, I don't really care. What brainwashed brainlet is sexualizing Jesus Christ to imagine him as an ideal haughty specimen? That's blasphemous. Also, Harry Styles, come on. This is so weak. This is so dumb. Pick somebody else. Pick one of the actual hotties of the Bible, like Samson. Come on. Jesus Christ as you're a hottie McHot sexy guy? Now, I'm not saying that people wouldn't and haven't sexualized Jesus Christ, but if you're this chick trying to fight the gay urge and not be a blasphemer, maybe don't imagine Jesus Christ as the person you want to bang. I'm just saying. She closes her eyes and thinks of the girl from the park now. Quote, I flash through the memories of this mysterious stranger, unsure if they are manifestations of repressed reality or some fully manufactured fantasy. Either way, I'm cautiously drawn to these romantic scenes, both attracted to the flame and terrified of getting burned. I don't understand how she immediately jumped to suppressed memories from this. What proof does she have that that is the thing? The story doesn't build it. It doesn't unlock it. It's just immediately she knows because she knows everything. The description of the scene leaves me asking how old any of the characters in this are. Quote, I see the girl and me in a cozy bohemian apartment. We're dancing together, jumping around with a large headphone strapped over our ears and two long cables snaking their way across the wood floor to an old glowing stereo. Because she says that she is 20 now, and it gives the impression that you go to this camp when you were younger, and yet this feels like they're already in their early 20s when they're in her apartment dancing to music. Or maybe it's like her girlfriend's mom's apartment, but it's not giving that vibe. up. She says that she'll find this girl again and then comes out of her dreams. Patchett, the gay urge demon, is standing right in front of her because she didn't fight the gay urge enough. Quote, "When I open my eyes again, Patchett is standing directly in front of me, her pallid face hovering just inches from mine. I expected her arrival, but I didn't know that it would be this close. Startled, I take a quick breath as the demon reaches out and snatches my hand. The second her long fingers wrap around my wrists, I'm in shock, the icy temperature urging me to pull away from my body, unable to do so. Patchett is incredibly strong, and my instinctual jerk barely registers as she gazes through me with those massive white eyes. I'm sorry, is all I can think to say, the words meekly mumbled from my mouth. In a sudden, precise movement, the pale woman reaches up and grips my pinky fingers in her other hand. She wrenches it sideways with a loud, sickening crack, tearing tendon and snapping a bone. I let out a blood-curdling howl, any previous thoughts of the dark-haired lover exorcised from my body. Bet you didn't expect demons exorcising the gay urge. Once that's done, the gay urge demon disappears. Rose falls to the ground, screaming. As she lays down in bed again, she thinks, quote, I still have no idea who the girl with the short dark hair is or why I can't remember her. But there's one thing I do know. I'm gay, and there's a demon out there who really doesn't want me to acknowledge it. The next part starts out with, quote, for someone who's happily spent their life under the thumb of strict rules and regulations, I have an uncanny knack for crime. Which makes no sense. We haven't seen this. The closest we've seen to this is her having a phone to look stuff up, probably lying to her parents about smartphones, but this is her breaking character and the author acknowledging it and then flipping you off while doing it. There is no character in this story, just props that'll be justified in doing whatever they do. You could have still had her trespass without that freaking line, but it wanted to make her edgy. On top of that, quote, of course, fresh from the extended hospital stay with my pinky and ring finger taped together and a slight limp that might never go away, hustling isn't exactly what it used to be, but I make it work. Of course, despite her having gotten into a car accident bad enough that she was hospitalized for days, she's still able to move around well enough to trespass into a church, or her doctor's office. She's sneaking around Kingdom of the Pines somehow. I don't know when she was released from the hospital, how she snuck away from her parents, or how she got black gloves and a plastic mask to sneak around in, but it's just there, manifested out of thin air. Quote, ordering a different but equally nondescript ski mask was considered when I was planning this from the hospital bed, but I decided to not risk a package showing up for my parents to find. Still wondering where she's gotten the money, because we have no idea that she has been given an allowance of any kind, let alone a bank card. She also said that she didn't have her phone in the hospital, so how would she have ordered it? This is what happens when you spend your life writing about sentient mac and cheese lesbian lawyers. Nothing matters. Just manifest. And your story is unserious and lame. And for me, when there is no stake, when the actions of the characters don't matter, when the stakes don't matter, when you just manifest answers and we're not going through a character struggling or making decisions and then either benefiting from those decisions or the situation not turning out the way that they thought it would, there is no reason to read the story. It's just wish fulfillment. And why do I want to read somebody's wish fulfillment? That is absolutely meaningless to me. It's just you getting your jollies off and possibly some of your anger management. Just dunking on the people you consider your haters that are a straw man anyway. Conveniently, she also mentions having an earlier morning session with a Dr. Smith where she left the window unlocked and apparently they didn't check it. This is the kind of thing that makes me also lose trust in the story because everything is convenient, and maybe we didn't see it like 3 chapters ago, but you didn't need to see it 3 chapters ago to be set up. You didn't need to see any setup. I'm just going to like put it right here. Kind of like how in Gretchen's book, when the characters had left the camp, they were then chapters later saying things that happened chapters ago that we actually should have seen because we were with the characters during that time, but the book skipped it and then retconned it later in the freaking book. She sneaks into the doctor's office and finds that he has hallucinatory drugs. Is this making it, again, more like Gretchen's book? She also finds some paperwork that shows her parents are paying for therapy, and she is surprised because she was told that the service is free. Why even make this lie? So the parents could have said, yeah, we're paying for therapy. It's not that weird. She escapes the office with these papers just before someone gets in there and looks them over. Quote, "Here in Neverton, it's hard to ignore the way that the camp's presence weaves through daily life. It is, after all, the central cog of our local economy. Without much else to export, having the world's most effective gay conversion therapy program in our own backyard has been a boon to the community. Folks fly in from across the globe to change the lives of their lost children." I wish that it had taken this idea and scooped it up to a million. Like I said, gift shops, everybody got the Camp Damascus shirts. Like in Alaska, because that's, where I'm from, everywhere you go, hunting, fur, moose nuggets, the wild berry, the fireweed, and, so it plays into the tourism a lot. It plays into the hunting a lot because that's a big part of the culture there. That's what brings in a lot of the money there. So, build into that. Have little action figures. Have a mascot for freaking Camp Damascus. How does Camp Damascus not have a freaking mascot? There's no identity to Camp Damascus or the Kingdom of the Pine. Zero. It tries because it has this 4 pillars that never come up except for the intro when she's talking to her dad. So it can be here are the 4 pillars. Never comes up later. She never reminds herself of them in times of difficulty. Another example would be, you go to Orlando and you can't freaking throw a rock without running into a shop that is hand-me-downs from freaking Disney's last season gift shops. Goods. Everywhere is used Disney stuff. Everywhere. Because Disney and Universal are what freaking make Orlando. So, come on. Also, the only bits that has been mentioned about Camp Damascus to this point was that one commercial and the plaques in the dude's room. But it's not anything that anyone talks about anywhere. No one's got a shared opinion. And even when she mentioned that she had friends who went there or who were in the commercials, they can't remember it. They can't talk about it. You should have them raving and hollering about how great it is. But also, maybe you would hide that it's a conversion therapy camp and maybe make it something else secretly, because I don't feel like it would be the world's biggest gay conversion camp openly. Call it rehabilitation. Then suddenly, with zero prompting, she awakens from her slumber. Quote, "My visions from the ambulance come swirling back like a vicious tornado tearing through my thoughts, and I remember the way that hard cement slab felt against my back, the drone of the chanting figures as it vibrated through my inner ear and crept into my skull. I still have no recollection of how I got to that place, nor how I left, but I now have a pretty good idea where it's hidden, as I've allowed myself to blossom and change, breaking the chains of this community that tightly wrapped around my heart, for as so long my perspective has also shifted, my outlook creeps along with me, lurking into the background until it's time to gaze out some familiar mental window, at which point I find myself shocked by the view. What once seemed so cut and dry has warped into an absolute nightmare. Now that it appears something even more sinister is going on, I'm forced to release these feelings and confront the horrific truth that will likely haunt me for a very, very long time. There was always something sinister going on at Camp Damascus. This doesn't even matter since Camp Damascus was never brought up. What this story needed to do was build the actual story or community around it, have the main character praising it as a great experience, her friends praise it as a great experience, maybe greet new people that are coming in from out of town to go to Camp Damascus and be like, you're gonna have a great time, gaslighting them because obviously you're gaslit, and then you bring the truth down to reveal it. The fact that it never brought up or built Camp Damascus as a part of the main character's life or identity or recollections, and no one praised it, no one talked about how great it was, and then you have this realization of hers saying that how important it was all of this time, and she is finally seeing things straight for the first time. It has zero impact because it never had a meaning. It's just lazy writing, and it's all telling, and it did none of the work necessary to give it any meaning. Then we're supposed to care. Quote, "Luckily, I'm a little less fire and brimstone than the word of God. I'm hoping for justice rather than retribution, but the heart of the matter remains. I was a cog in a terrible machine for years, and now I'm honored to be the monkey wrench dismantling it." She said it's not retribution, but justice. I would definitely say the ending is retributionist. Again, we never saw her obeying. Even in the beginning, she was disobeying her parents. She was already lusting after Martina on the first page. We never saw her obeying or trying to obey, which included undermining them as she got on her phone. It's not a realization. It's not an act of rebellion. It's a forced plot for something that was never established. And for me, it looks like a skill issue. Rose obsesses with how she now knows the truth and no one can fool her, and she can't ignore the deceptions. With her folder of names, she's looking around for other people who went to Kingdom of Pines as patients. I don't know how she's doing this while still staying in the hospital, because she then goes to get a coffee at a coffee shop to talk to someone involved in the church trying to get more information, and quote, "I'd love to keep smiling and agreeing with every little thing she says, but out of worry I'll be quizzed on it later, I'm forced to shake my head no. Fortunately, I've read everything else by Pete Bend, but the new release copy from my parents remained unopened on my hospital bedstand." That, in fact, proves that she is doing all of this extra work while she's supposed to be in the hospital, and nobody in the hospital is either noticing that she's gone or reporting her. And these are multiple trips to multiple people from the folders that she got from the doctor's office, the other doctor's office at Kingdom of the Pines. As she's talking, she thinks, quote, "It's our duty at Kingdom of the Pines to spread the message of Prophet Cobel far and wide, to keep his lessons and the teachings of Jesus, firm in their deeper meaning, but palatable to an ever-changing world. Getting members of the congregation into positions of executive power is an important step in this process, and while some people might find the mixture of business and faith off-putting, for us it's the whole point. For too long, religion has taken a back seat to other organizations that are willing to embrace capitalism. Organizations willing to admit that sometimes the ends do justify the means." Too bad we haven't seen this in anything that she does, so she's not even breaking the programming, she was just never programmed. It's announced eventually that Rose has actually talked to 5 other people about Camp Damascus, none of which gave her any response, none of which also reported her for acting out, you would think that the bees would mention something if somebody came into the hive as an enemy. Somebody broke the programming, but no. If you want to build suspense, you need to write some of this out. And not everything needs to be written out, but some of these moments do need to be written out. It feels like a first draft note that should have been expanded on during revision. The girl that Rose is then meeting with later after 5 other people, Allie, gives some visual response that looks like she remembers something, and a demon shows up even against Allie's denial. Rose worries that Allie is calling the church and reporting her to get her in trouble. What I really hate is this quote. "I knew this would happen sooner or later," I scold myself. "This is the path that I took when I decided to turn my back on faith. I chose to abandon my cozy, calm life for this chaos. But this wasn't my choice. This wasn't my freaking choice, and I'm not the one who created the chaos here. Something is wrong in Neverton, and that something isn't me." She is choosing. She's denying that she's choosing, and again, it's pushing another character as inactive, not part of anything. So if anything goes wrong, it's not her fault. That's what this is. She heads home, calling her dad first, and everything seems fine. Her mom, however, is waiting on a corner a couple blocks down from her house. When the two of them talk, Mom exposes that Dad knows that Rose has been asking about Camp Damascus, and they have staged an intervention back at the house because she's a deviant. Quote, "This is all for you," Lisa groans. "Your dad's waiting back in the house with some men from the congregation. They've got zip ties and duct tape. They're going to take you back to Camp Damascus, whether you like it or not, and I can't watch you go through that again. You might not remember it, but I will." I don't really know how you can do this when it's a youth camp and the main character is 20. Maybe it shouldn't have been called a camp. Maybe a retreat, or again, a rehabilitation. But it's a very weird to push it as this thing for teens when you also have adults using it. This just feels so poorly designed and plotted. Her mother helps her escape by not reporting that she is there and talking to her when Dad calls and tells her to leave. She drives away and screams in agony, realizing that she needs to ditch the car because it's her dad's. And then, mother of all cringe, she decides to start creating verses of herself. Quote, "A few verses about A few verses about preservation pop into my head. Matthew 24:13, Romans 2:7, and of course Galatians 6:9. But I immediately push them away. Now is not the time for obtuse 2,000-year-old advice from dead men. Instead, I look inward, crafting a proper verse of my own. Rose 1:1-2. She raised the flaming sword, not to rend her heart, but to seal the wound where a heart had been. For those who cast her out did not know this steadfast flame, alight with righteous anger, would never cease until the heavenly kingdom fell. As dire as this moment is, I can't help the smile that creeps across my weary face. That was pretty good. She said this wasn't about retribution. Freaking first verse that she comes up with is about retribution. And praising herself, quote, Rose 2:6. And then the morning came, and she pushed onward, because the wicked and the vile bore down from every side, and onward was the only direction that she had left. It just feels like she made herself a saint and then immediately started praising herself. Rose goes to another place on the list that she got from Smith's office. A mechanic who likes metal music greets her, recognizes her warmly. He's willing to sit down with her and talk about the camp, whatever he can remember. But that's not Saul's biggest stereotype. Quote, for one, Saul is absolutely covered in tattoos, the dark and intricate markings running down his arms and up his neck. His nose is pierced with a single ring on the right side, but his ears are chock full of glinting silver and gold bars. The man's black t-shirt features a band logo so distorted by violent spikes and spires that it has become unreadable, and below this is a graphic depiction of vile, gore-soaked carnage. This man used to be a camp counselor. Rose thinks about being mad, but she knows that he's also tethered to a gay urge demon. So as this guy is talking to Rose, you get this little bit of non-effort. Quote, have you ever stopped to ask yourself how Camp Damascus is so successful? The official answer is that it just is. And they can get away with this non-response because the numbers speak for themselves. There are several rumors, however. One theory is the program relies on cutting-edge cognitive studies, developed with the help of Pastor Ben's Silicon Valley business connections, who would rather remain anonymous. Using huge swaths of online data, they've determined exactly what steps one can take to remain pure. Another theory is Prophet Koba left behind additional sacred texts, a trove of hidden documents containing secrets of the universe from Jesus himself. These informational writings provided the congregation with a leg up against our competition. Of course, the most common response is the classic one. It's just God's will. I get that what it's trying to do, and you can do it especially with the cult angle, but then you don't have it just is. Just repeat, it's God's will. It's God's will. It's God's will. In a cult, that's a good enough answer. He also says that this place does demon rituals to tether gays to demons. Of course, obviously, I'm like, how are they getting demons to do this? We'll find out that the church has enslaved the demons with some kind of collar that makes them obey. I don't know. We don't get any data on that. We just get to see, oh, she notices collars, she speaks Latin, a collar falls off, they attack the church. That's all that we know about them. If you expected effort, joke's on you. Quote, Saul climbs to his feet, heading to a study in the next room and calling out while he roots around. The demons will keep you away from sin. They'll scare you away from impure thoughts, and typically that's enough. In extreme cases, the demon will resort to violence. Sometimes they'll torture the one who's possessed. Sometimes they'll eliminate the target of desire. Either way, Kingdom of the Pine is a thriving business with a spotless success rate. Again, probably because they don't report on their failures, but also I am going to need some world building, some explanation for how demons are going to scare you and control you into salvation. How does that work within this church? You need to answer that question. Also, and you could have answered it well enough by saying that they think the demons they are summoning are angels and they are controlling the angels, or they've become so delusional that they think that humans have a right to control the angels and it is just demons. Like, there are so many things you could do with this, but you needed to justify it, especially if you're going to say this is a church, but now they're summoning demons and using demons to stop sin, but the church considers gay a sin. She asks how Saul knows all of this, and he says spiritual studies and prayer. For once, Rose makes sense. Quote, I stare at my host awkwardly. Wait, after all of this, you still believe in prayer? You believe in God? You don't? Saul counters with a laugh. There's a demon attached to you, darling. Are you really saying the devil is out there doing his wicked work, but now God is a bridge too far? I open my mouth to respond, but the words catch in my throat. He's got a fair point. I've been so wrapped up in my disillusionment with the church itself that I didn't even see what was sitting right in front of me. The mountains of evidence that something else was out there. Of course, it's difficult to tell what that something is, but throwing out the whole cosmic realm might not be the most logical of actions. I haven't been pushing through the journey with as much balance as I'd like, mostly because swinging hard in the opposite side of belief feels so good right now. I'm angry after all. Deep down, however, I'm analytical enough to know that this isn't the best approach. They exchange information with each other to try to get behind where the demons are coming from, which had to do with computers that she saw during the car crash. Saul eventually says the name Willow, which is the girl from the park, and Rose wants to know who she is, but he won't say. I don't know why he brought this up just to say I can't tell you who she is, other than lazy writing. Rose says that they should just kill and burn the demons, and Saul is like, what? How can you burn a demon to death? Hell is made of hellfire. Quote, their flesh and blood, I interrupt, reminding him of the tangible nature we've ascribed to these otherworldly beings. Saul is still unconvinced. Why would a demon burn? He asks. They're from a world of eternal flame. So he called to them, Father Abraham, have pity on me and send Lazarus to dip the tip of his finger in the water and cool my tongue, because I am in agony in this fire. I consider everything I know about these creatures and my encounters with them, walking through each of my harrowing experiences and allowing myself to catalog every moment. I think back to the time in the dark living room and at the party and my memories of that slab. It turns out that hell is actually a frozen wasteland, and it was a translation error that said fire, so demons are actually weak against fire. And now she says, quote, I have never read Dante's Inferno, which is strictly banned in the Darling household, but after spending the last 2 weeks researching all things hellish with Saul, I know the poem pretty well. And that makes me ask, how do you know the poem really well without ever having read it? This should imply that up until 2 weeks ago, she'd never read it, but now she has. How do you know something so well, but you have never read it? Then Rose launches into her reasoning over why Camp Damascus must die in the very after-school special description. Quote, the church makes the same assurance to all parents who abandon their sons and daughters in this terrible place, claiming they'll fix something broken. But they're wrong. I'm living, breathing proof these conversions are all smoke and mirrors, the outward appearance of change over something that's internally immutable. Nobody who's graduated Camp Damascus program is ex-gay. They're just even more tormented than before. They've been frightened and threatened into submission, a tactic that's been used against queer people for centuries. The only difference is that now these threats have been outsourced. In a darkly hilarious way, it all makes perfect sense, the natural culmination of a philosophy that has colored my life for 20 years. Prophet Kobel taught us God wants his followers to thrive and win, that humility is important, but it certainly doesn't supersede progress and growth. Born of the Industrial Revolution, Kingdom of Pine, it is very clear, when it comes to spreading God's love, you do what needs to be done. According to the congregation, my sins outweigh my discomfort about demonic collaborations, and while this might seem like an impossible mental gymnastic to outsiders, it makes perfect sense to me. She's not going to explain it, though. It's hardly the worst thing organized religion has come up with. While I used to consume religious canon in a state of mystery and wonder, I now find myself utterly shocked that I ever believed a word of it. Saul, on the other hand, claims that he's closer to God than ever. I don't know why she chose to get in the car and go with Saul to church just to complain and wait in the car saying, quote, obviously, there's more than one way to be religious. You're proof of that, I continue. But then I can't help wondering, why bring God into this at all? Is your heavy metal really better than Jesus and the liner notes? She keeps asking him for help and then insults him for his choices while she sits in the car watching a community gather at church to then lecture Saul more. Quote, "There are things that I miss out on my old life, like community and family and just going to church on a day like today. You've shown me how someone can find love in that book on their own terms, but too many people around here have used it for hate." Saul stays with her in the car during the service, so she's not alone and she appreciates it. Then they go somewhere that it doesn't set up where they're going, and the next chapter literally starts with, "You look nervous," says. "You look nervous," Paul says, through a single wireless headphone in my right ear. "Don't worry, it's just a demon from the depths of hell here to keep you from being too gay." I can't help laughing. "Well, when you put it like that, I suppose that I could loosen up a bit." I glance at the camera above me, peering down from one of the metal structures within Saul's enormous garage. Before she gets ready to go in and do whatever she's about to do, she has effectively become a prophet to herself, continuing to pray to herself. Quote, "Or would that just give the creature time to adapt and plan? I'd typically find confidence in prayer at a moment like this. Now, however, I find confidence in myself, mining strength from the simple fact that pushing onward is the only option that we've got." Rose 7:8. "And upon the wicked she shall rain a mighty tempest of fire, smiting those who dared steal away her thoughts but forgot to quell her vengeance." It's pain in how edgy it's trying to be. Rose then flashbacks to being with Willow, where I assume we're supposed to care, but this author has made zero attempt in showing their relationship to make us care and still does zero, relying instead on, quote, "Another time she is sobbing because a pet died. At least I think that's what happened, and when I try comforting her, my words come out wrong and cold and strange. She's upset at first, but we talk through it. I apologize and she accepts. Our relationship wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, but it was real. It was misunderstandings and growth and forgiveness and acceptance and, of course, the beauty that comes along with all of that. We were so much more than a montage of upbeat music and endless smiles. In those days, we weren't afraid to be ourselves. That's something that I'd never felt before." Wish I could care. But thanks for spark noting me your own book, bro. Love it. In some hangar, she somehow summons Patchett, probably with gay thoughts, and tricks her into a flame-spewing device that looks like a phone booth. Patchett dies. No struggle, no problem. Nothing. The only thing left behind is a collar and a name tag, which prompts, quote, "You ever wonder why they wear name tags?" Saul asks, interrupting my thoughts. It's a simple query, but shocking in the fact that I hadn't considered it much until now. I'm aware of the demon's quirky attire, obviously, but the implications behind it had never really crossed my mind. I don't know the answer, and I'm not sure Saul is really expecting one. He's grappling with the same thing that I did after locking Willow's demon in my flaming car, coming to terms with the intrusion of something truly bizarre within our own concrete realities. It's one thing to believe in the collection of intangible supernatural forces floating through the ether, looming just behind a curtain of our world like ghosts, but these demons are not that. These are mortal beings. While the things they wear and do may seem utterly bizarre, their oddities still weave together in a very real system of rules, regulations, and yes, name tags. I don't know, I finally reply. Maybe they're at work. Obviously they're not, they're enslaved, but I don't know. I think it's just dumb. Somebody might think it's funny. I think it's dumb. And then it just feels like the author is pointing out how they put something in here that they aren't going to explain and it's stupid, but they're like, haha, you can't get me because I did call out, at least referenced it, but there's nothing. They go to Saul's computer room where he randomly has a bunch of videos of Patchett coming through the portal into the hangar, but also from here you've got cameras during Truth or Dare. I don't know where those came from. And then they're like going in, they've got like a drone footage of going into hell through the portal, and then the video breaks. More thoughts of Willow, more so before they actually became something, and then she kisses Willow, and she can't remember anything after that. She wakes up to the noise in Saul's house. She doesn't recognize it. She looks out of the window and sees Saul playing on a stage with a boy band, and as they're doing their thing, a demon manifests, quote, "A second figure appears in the tall grass, stepping out and reveling their awkward, gangly shape. This is the tallest demon I've seen, a rail-thin humanoid with pale skin and long black hair. They're sporting the same red polo as the others, and based on the proportions of their lanky frame, I can only imagine how difficult sizing must have been. My first instinct is to run out and help Saul, to make sure that he has all of the support he needs while literally facing down his demon. But I don't move an inch. As crazy as it sounds, giving Saul his space is the most supportive thing that I can do. Consequences be damned. If it were up to me, every one of these creatures would have been dealt with in a safe, organized style, coaxed into our new machine one by one and dispatched with precision and efficiency. Saul and I are not the same person, however, and his personal journey is not for me to insert myself. It's trying to do a metaphor, but it really just looks like she's leaving her friends out to deal with their thing by themselves while she literally was helped by him to conquer her demon. And she inserted herself into Willow conquering her demon. So it's just, I hate this character. Then the way that this is presented makes the book look like it doesn't care. Quote, "Instead, I watch with rapt attention as these two figures face off, Saul coming to terms with his past as slamming pop music paints the scene with unexpected vibrancy. Saul is yelling something at the demon now, his face flowing with emotion as he says his piece." That's it. That's the battle. What else happened? Doesn't matter. He's attacked, uses a flamethrower on it, and wins. She is now going to meet with Willow. Somehow the woman is willing to meet her, despite being too afraid to talk to her and having no way of knowing that her demon is gone. Also, I don't know how Rose got Willow's number, but she has it. They're now at a bookstore and she's telling Willow that their demons are dead, and they make up, and then they try to catch up on missed time. Instead of building any relationship, Willow just dumps on it. Quote, "My name is Willow Crogwell. Legally speaking, it's Magdalene Crogwell, but let's keep that between us. The first time I told you this, you never mentioned it again, so I trust you. I'm 21 years old. I'm a Gemini, which doesn't matter since I don't believe in astrology. My favorite dessert is a cinnamon roll, and my favorite movie is The Thing. You've never seen it, but one time you sat through it with the headphones on and an open book in your lap because you knew that it meant a lot to me. You looked up once during the dog transformation scene and never looked up again. One time on a mission trip to Las Vegas, I snuck into a Great Britannica casino and a drunk guy gave me $100 chip, but I was too scared to collect the cash, so now I keep it at my bedside table. I've been living on my own since a fight with my parents 3 years ago." I'm listening intently, legitimately, thankful for the rapid-fire format. My folks were still supporting me while I was in online classes until they found out about us and cut me off. Willow continues. "They wouldn't help with rent unless I spent some time in Camp Damascus. That was the deal." I have a hard time feeling anything for her when she says, well, it just had to do with rent, so I went to the anti-gay camp so my parents would pay my bills. When they were how old? Again, I don't know. This was 3 years ago. She said 17 when she got into a fight with her parents, but her parents were still taking care of her bills while she was taking online classes. And they only fought after they found out about the girlfriend, and then sent her to gay camp anyway. None of it makes sense. The timeline doesn't make sense. Willow also suggests that they run away together, but Rose doesn't want to leave the others in need. Willow says that she's been waiting a long time for this, but we have no idea how long that is because we don't even know when they were dating. And we get this teenager atheist conversation, quote, "Actually, I did have a way of knowing," I continue. "I should have been paying more attention, but that's not the point. The point is, I was doing all of these things because God said it was right. My whole life, that was always the motivation. But the real, genuine good is something righteous if you're doing it because you're worried about getting punished if you decline. While this may be the cause for some people who obey religious figures, it's not the deeper thing that draws it, and it is an immature perspective, in my opinion, which whatever, she's 20. Willow eventually agrees to help Rose destroy the demon machine, and that's all this leads up to. A demon machine run by the church. She leaves her apartment and moves in with Saul and Rose, and then it's time to move into the Kingdom of Pine territory. Saul's uneasy and won't share why. Over time, the memories gradually return, just like that by by watching old commercials from Camp Damascus, and now they're remembering the layout of the park. It's trying so hard to flip people off. Quote, "This is my parents' worst nightmare," I announce, gazing at the living room ceiling with a pillow behind my head. Their gay daughter and her lesbian girlfriend in a spooky old farmhouse doing drugs with a metalhead. She closes her eyes and thinks really hard to project herself into her old memories again where she's at Camp Damascus, and this whole dream sequence can be summarized in this stupid quote. "Are they always under renovation?" I ask. "I don't know," Saul retorts. "I'm just a manifestation of your memory." So she goes through the campus, but it's another astral projection in her memories to make things up, but it's all completely accurate, and it's going to be the map that they use later when they actually go there. At the end of working through whether to believe these memories or not, the drugs that she took or not, she comes to the conclusion of, quote, "Maybe a little faith isn't so bad," a voice abruptly offers from deep within me, bubbling up from the darkness and making a profoundly simple case. Find balance. To be fair, this all or nothing approach has been getting exhausting. The further away that I get from the time with Kingdom of Pine, the more I'm realizing it's not so much the faith that I'm upset about. It's the hate and fear disguised as concern and charity. Faith is just a vessel, and while it can certainly be used to justify truly horrible things, maybe I'm letting the aggressors off the hook by blaming faith itself. So they're going to go to camp and look for that cabin that she astro projected to. The assumed love and memories that Rose has is what keeps her going, and I find this line to be a little cringe and trying too hard. Quote, "What's the point of busting into a conversion camp to slay demons with a flamethrower and smash up their possession machine if you're not going to listen to black metal while doing it?" he retorts. It's a fair point. As they get closer to the camp, she says that she feels psychic energy, but at the same time it doesn't exist. The narrative keeps doing this thing where it says that there is this thing, but it also is not there. They sneak in, run into some kid camper looking for archery, trying to get him to be quiet, but they have to hide real quick because they hear other people coming. And from their hiding place, you get, quote, "I know that I should keep my head against the hay, but as usual, my curiosity gets the best of me, and I cautiously peek around the edge, watching the scene unfold." She's supposed to be some super smart character, acknowledging that she's being stupid just to show the scene. We don't need a description so bad that she's going to break character, because all that happens is the kid looks scared, the kid lies to the adults that he didn't see anything, and then he gets taken back to wherever he came from. They just continue forward then, quote, "For the place that's supposedly never available to use, it's shockingly well kept. The lawn tight and the stark white cabins freshly painted without a blemish to be found. Of course, there's plenty of metaphysical rot lurking just below the surface, but you'd never know it." Why would this camp not be kept in proper condition when they literally have celebrities sending at people from around the world here to be converted? There's also a lot of mind reading being done in this book. You wouldn't know thing, but I know this thing. They find a lab underneath the floor in the cabin, and they find a bunch of kids in cells. They're going to save those kids, and the team thinks, quote, "That's the thing about Kingdom of Pine," he finally admits. "The stuff they believed, the message they pounded into our heads, none of it was that weird. They're just the 1,000th little twist on the exact same book." Saul's right. While the congregation is clearly up to something deeply troubling, the basic foundation of their beliefs is not much different than that of any sect to come before. They may be a little more hard-nosed and a little more open about their utilitarian approach, but their principles are, well, pretty average. That confirms to you that this is just a hit job. That's the scariest thing about them. They're not that special. Let's just fix what we can, I suggest. Rose 1530, for the righteous sword of truth is so sharp that even half a swing will graze a bone of incredible depths. It's never not going to be cringe for Rose to keep versing herself, to pump herself up. This also doesn't make any sense, because you have this group of science people pretending to be church people to summon a demon to ungay the kids, with no motivation behind it. They just are. There's no religious belief in this, which is usually what pushes the don't be gay thing. But if there's no real religion here, And not only that, you can't say that you're doing it for God because you're summoning demons, and how do they justify it? Again, this could have been resolved by just sharing the motivation behind and their logic behind this, but the author didn't put in the work to actually determine the character's motivations in this. Quote, Saul just stares back at me, and for a moment of silence, I realize how unusual that was. Are you making up your own Bible verses? He asks. Yeah, I admit. Up until this point, I hadn't said any out loud, though. Saul considers this a moment and then nods, wiping away his welling tears. Sick. That was super metal. That was super cringe. This is Something So Lovely, Polaris Rising, and many other books like this. The cast just exists to affirm the main character and nothing else. They keep going and eventually come upon some test tubes of demon larvae. As they look in the test tubes again, Rose tells us how she's stupid again for just another jump scare. Quote, oh wow, is all I can think to say, the inquisitive part of my mind fully overriding any good sense that I might otherwise harness to pull away. Before my friends have any chance to call out and remind me, a purple tube erupts from the creature's mouth in a quick snap, slamming against the side of the tank and prompting me to stumble back in shock. The hollow proboscis, which features a frighteningly sharp point, rubs against the glass for a moment as it struggles to catch hold. When that doesn't work, a cascade of tiny white eggs begins pumping forth, spilling across the bottom of the tank. I can only assume that those were intended for placement somewhere deep within my skin. If you're gonna pretend to be smart this whole book, then stop being conveniently stupid just for the description of a jump scare. As they talk about this new discovery and having bugs in them, probably from whatever this is, a guest comes in, specifically Dr. Smith. Chapter 12 at 81% starts out with, quote, the worms were such a horrific detour that we've completely let our guards down. Now, turning to face our unforeseen visitor, I find myself staring into speckled eyes I know all too well. It feels like the author gave up, if they even tried at this point, telling the readers straight up the oh dear, we were distracted and let our guards down, oh boys, sadness. Thanks. We couldn't have figured that out with the way the last chapter ended. He has a gun, and they say they only needed the bugs for the memory loss. They start getting sassy with the doctor, quote, bullshit, Saul snaps. You made a deal with the devil, and now you're gonna lecture us about who has most faith? And after you have suffered a little while, the God of all grace, who has called you to his eternal glory in Christ, will himself restore, confirm, strengthen, and establish you. Dr. Smith retorts, this is a small price to pay to change the world. Look at you. You've all been delivered from your sins of the flesh. Saul shakes his head. And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it, he counters. And there are varieties of ministries of the same Lord. The Dr. Smith snaps back and laughs a bit. He's pleased with himself. I could do this all day. How is he not recognizing that Saul is covered in tattoos and piercings and like this demon shirt? Obviously, he is not doing what this church has wanted him to do if he is looking like that. Because isn't that the whole entire point of him looking the way that he does in rebellion to what the church would approve of? Quote, I can't take this anymore. It's almost as if the Bible can be twisted into supporting whatever point of view you want, I blurt out. They agree that this isn't what God wants. They're torturing kids. Quote, don't do this, I blurt. You can pull out any shred of scripture to convince yourself that the ends justify the means, but if God is this brutal, what's the point of worshiping him in the first place? If the big guy is really signing off on this torture, then I'm not on his team, whether he's real or not. I don't think that you want to be on that team either. Dr. Smith listens intently. If I didn't know any better, I'd think that I'd spotted the faintest flicker of empathy lurking behind his cold expression. Saul steps forward to interject. We're not asking you to question God's existence. We're not even asking you to question his motives. We're saying your interpretation might be off. God is infallible, man is not. Dr. Smith says that the security is on their way, doesn't trust the bag in Saul's hands. Saul opens it. Dr. Smith can't tell a flamethrower from a container of bug spray, so he just laughs it off. And Saul wields the flamethrower and just lets it rip. They all get away and lock themselves in an office, or they go separate ways, and Rose goes over here in an office, and then Willow and Saul go that way. And the demon bug creatures attack Dr. Smith on the other side, leaving us with this description, quote, Dr. Smith rushes for his weapon as I retreat into the office, throwing metal doors shut just in time to see my companions do the same on the other side of the chamber. I back away from the door as frantic yelps begin to erupt from the opposite side. As the squealing creatures grow louder, so does Dr. Smith, and soon enough the voice transforms into a muffled jumble of desperate prayers. Another gunshot rings out, then another. Each bang prompts me to jump in alarm, and I stumble a bit as I back into the desk behind me. Dr. Smith's voice quickly grows more frantic, transitioning from anxious speech to shrieks of utter terror. Whatever's happening on the other side of the door sounds horrifically painful, a chaotic blend of stabbing, proboscis, crawling wet invertebrates, and a frenzied stomp and kick of Dr. Smith as he struggles to keep them at bay. Eventually, there's a loud thump as what must be the doctor's body collapses to the floor. His screams have devolved into guttural heaving groans, animalistic and sloppy in a way that's difficult to imagine for this straight-laced blowhard. He retched loudly as the crawling, squishing noises slowly fade away. And then, silence. Dude breaks down the door. He's then consumed mostly by all of the test bugs and loses his mind. Bugs fly out of all of his orifices, and he loses his mind and dies. For no reason, the bugs aren't attacking her now, as she walks through them and finds Saul and Willow safe on the other side of the room. So none of them had to really do anything, and the main character remained uninvolved in action this entire time. Willow and Saul have destroyed the hell out of the wormhole machine, and now they need to leave before the security gets there. He says, quote, "We did what we could," Saul offers as Willow and I release our grip on each other. "Bent and warped as many pieces as possible. I'm taking the important stuff with me." On the way out, there are multiple troops of humans, whatever this is, standing outside. Multiple military cult troops that have rows of demons. There's a showdown between Rose and the pastor, which is so superficial to me. Because the pastor hasn't even been a presence in this stupid book. They just talk about saving her soul, but what's that even mean when he's working with literal demons? As she believes that she's about to die, suddenly she starts reciting Latin incantations. Quote, "Words begin tumbling out of my mouth, not the traditional prayers that I was raised with, but a bizarre Latin passage from Saul's occult demonology tome. I got a specific text in mind, the one that felt less like a prayer and more like instructions from some holy artifact, the prayer for release." How convenient. This never mentioned before, but hey, great. Demonology tomes. That wasn't even mentioned before either, if I recall correctly. Maybe I don't, but I don't remember it. Turns out that the church had obedience collars on the stupid demons in order to tag them to kids. They all fall off during her perfectly chosen incantation, and quote, Pastor Ben's eyes are wide with disbelief. "What did you do?" he cries, shaking his head from side to side and sporting an oddly sympathetic expression. "I offered you a painless death, and now they'll drag you to hell. It's their nature to punish the sinful and depraved. We command them with mercy in our hearts, but now they're free." So it's clear that they're going to attack the cult members since they've been the ones who are sinning in their hearts, right? Wow, so powerful. It appears that judgment has come. Quote, "I cower under Heth's gaze, face to face with the judgment I've been promised since I was a child. All of my decisions, every personality flaw, every white lie and venial sin hoisted upon the scale and settled accordingly. For God will bring every dead into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil. I drop to my knees and close my eyes. But in these final moments, I don't ask for forgiveness. I don't accept Jesus as my savior, and I don't suddenly repent the love I feel for Willow. She still holding my hand, and as the scales of good and evil weigh with gesture through the stern glare of some higher power, I only squeeze tighter. If they've got a problem with this, then frick 'em. They may be powerful, but they're wrong. So number one, these are a bunch of demons. It is God that passes judgment, not the demons. The demons are inhabitants of hell or other prisoners in hell or whatever. But God is the one that passes judgment, not the demons. And so if you're like, I'm going to reject God, why would demons even attack you? Because you are now an ally to the demons. Also, it feels so teenager, it's stupid. Clearly, whoever Isheth is ignores her. You know these are demons, not angels, so why wouldn't they overlook whatever they want? And it's not actual judgment or anything. The cult is trying to fight the demons and failing, quote. Meanwhile, a vicious assault of pummeling Christian deathcore washes over the scene in a hellish soundtrack that honestly couldn't be more fitting, couldn't be more cringy. I assume it's trying to be camp, but it's just not making it for me. Her and Willow then get rifles for themselves and shoot some gas cans to set off fire on this demon battlefield. Why, when they apparently are on the demon's side and the demon are ignoring them, I don't know, but whatever. The demons are mostly just torturing everyone. It mixes between saying keeping all alive and snapping their necks. Some of them are being dragged to hell through the wormholes. Kids from the camp are all fine, being left alone by the demons as well, and bring on the message at the end, quote. Meanwhile, screams of horror continue ringing out through the night. Camp counselors receiving judgment for the very creatures they hired to do the judging. Religious lore of all stripe teaches of entities who act as enforcers, and if you believe in these creatures, then the truth of either verdict often comes as a package deal. If angels and demons exist, their motivations might as well fit the profile that we've laid out for them. Now, however, I know the truth. Whatever these beings are, whether spiritual manifested or defined by the same science that governs the rest of us, it's clear their moral scale is not perfectly calibrated with the church's. Certainly not as much as the congregation would have you believe. I have no doubt the culture of these creatures revolves around pain, punishment, and judgment, but once the church shackles fall away, they answer to an even higher cosmic assessment of right and wrong. What that is, I am not sure, but it certainly doesn't have a problem with gay people, forcing bigoted views on others and ramming them through a destructive system of conversion therapy, however, appears to be a massive ethical transgression. The demons care about ethics. Who knew? The camp burns. The campers that were there are continuing to wreck it because why not? Rose congratulates herself on freeing everybody. Rose and Willow kiss each other in that moment, and then she is hopeful for the future because the conversion camp is over. It ends with, quote, within the softness of our lips and the tickles of her hair as it frames my cheek, I discover a safety unlike anything I've ever known, a sense of true acceptance. Meanwhile, the flames continue billowing into the sky behind us, a raging inferno where Camp Damascus once stood. The blaze is so large that its orange mountainside glow illuminates the entire Neverton Valley. My shadow stretches on for miles, fully engulfing the city below. I don't know how your shadow goes on that long. It seems like it's meant to be a symbol, but at this point, I'm just done with it. So that's the end of the book. Final notes that I have. Something that makes this feel YA is how it relies so much on telling you what it wants you to think of the characters rather than building them out. In many cases, this is fine. You can make it work. The point of this story is obviously not the character exploration, as it doesn't give a crap about showing what makes any of these characters Christian. Instead, it relies on good Christian girl, good Christian boy, and just telling you about their relationships in general. Cuckoo did the same thing where it said Jesus camp, but then the counselors never actually evoked the name of God or his son. Part of this feels like negligence on the author's part because they don't care about the subject, and these roles are just tools to push the theme or point of the story, in which case is very obvious. In order to actually develop characters, you have to give them some legitimacy, compassion, and understanding in their way of life. And in both this book and Cuckoo, it doesn't feel like the authors cared because they actually have bones to pick with the antagonists of the story, which, fine, do your draggy do. But it's something that not only makes the writing read weak and uncaring, but immature, slanted, and literally just for the message. It's the same as books that say the character is kind and strong-willed or courageous. It's the same with books that say a character is kind, courageous, and strong-willed, but we never see it. You're just supposed to believe what you're told, and that's just immature writing. Clearly, Chuck Tingle has a backlog of writing that is literally just there to mock and belittle people that he doesn't agree with or like. Whether you like it or not, that's what his backlog does. So it's no wonder that he wouldn't give a damn about the characters that he's writing in this story and do yet another hollow hit job with people and ideas as props to scream personal and political beliefs at through underdeveloped strawmen. Another thing that feels like YA writing, quote, "Today was good," I reply, stretching my enthusiasm as far as it could possibly go. "Isaiah is really nice." Dr. Smith chuckles to himself as he says this. Thrilled by the rebellious nature of his childhood, he settles into his chair even more, allowing the blue and white pieces of furniture to envelope him. This book said somebody stopped in their tracks so many times. I noticed every single time because it did it again and again and again. It couldn't find a better way to stop people from moving when they were surprised. It was impossible for me to believe that this character was 20. She should have been younger. Adults don't go to camps like this. Camps don't take adults. The whole thing of it being a teen camp doesn't make sense when they're 20. And her parents had no reason to pay for her school or to be encouraging her or whatever. She could have run away. Also, the timeline didn't make any sense at all, especially with how long it could have made her be best friends with Willow and then kept thinking that Martina was Willow. It could have done so much. And then having Willow just disappear. And being confused, also being reintroduced to Willow because she remembers that she had a childhood friend named Magdalene. Like, there is so much that could have been done here to make it more thoroughly developed, and just, it's an insult that it wasn't, honestly. I feel insulted that I had to read this, and the author doesn't seem to care. I cannot believe this went through traditional publishing and it had the constantly changing names. Quote, "Before I have a chance to stop him, however, Luke yanks open the closet door. My father halts abruptly, staring into the darkness for a beat and then reaching out to turn the light on." This is first person. How you refer to people should be consistent with how the character thinks of them. Luke and my father are the same person, but the way that it's listed makes it seem like it's two different people. It should either be Luke, or my father, my father. I think that it jumped the gun on introducing the flies as related to the gay thought control, whatever, and it should have shown what the actual camp's effect was on her to have her perform the role with Isaiah, like I mentioned earlier, especially when her therapist was like, "Go have fun." And the control bug was like, "You need to." But then she did, and it doesn't feel right. And then she thinks something is wrong with her, confides in Martina, and Martina is like, "Maybe you don't have those kinds of feelings." And then she thinks maybe we should try them out. Then she and Martina kiss, and then she's like, oh my gosh, because she has this flood of feelings, goes home, vomits bugs. Her parents are concerned because that means something is off with the conversion, and they're like, we should get you to the doctor. And then she's like, why am I going to the therapist and not the hospital? And like start building these weird things. The passage of time was not accounted for. She is harmed, and then you don't even know. Like, again, she went in that car accident. That was bad enough she was hospitalized. She was never checked out. She had her fingers plied together, and then she just, none of it matters. If you like spite writing, that's what this feels like to me. And if you get something out of spite writing because that's what you enjoy the emotional expression, you enjoy the camaraderie of somebody agreeing with you and sharing those beliefs and like bashing on the same straw man with you, then this is probably for you. But for me, everything that this book did really didn't matter because the moment that it needed a solution, the author just tossed one in there. And it could be a single line that it's like, oh yeah, like 3 weeks ago I looked at this thing and now I know full Latin. Nothing is built into or from it. And at the end of the day, it just feels like a troll book that there's no meaning to read. It preaches at you and doesn't commit to anything. And ultimately, if you look at Chuck's backlog, that's really what the backlog feels like. It's a bunch of troll books. So what do you expect? I have no respect for this. And I cannot believe it was a Bram Stoker award winner from Tor, a traditional publisher. This piece of garbage. And if you recall, I will do a throwback here. A couple of years ago, I did a video that featured some of Chuck's other books, the very specific kind that Chuck got famous for. And I said, look, this person can get a following for this kind of stuff. There is an audience for everything. There is an audience for Camp Damascus. I am clearly not that audience. So, just because I have strong opinions doesn't mean other people cannot like this book. I clearly do not, and I hope you took something away from at least the more constructive comments that I had on like how to build something out or why something didn't matter. But otherwise, there's that. With that said, let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Have you read this book? Will you read this book? With all that said, have a great weekend and don't die.
Was that Wayland Cross in the trunk? Do you know, or is that something that's still being figured out?
The person in the trunk was not Wayland Cross.
Is he in trouble?
We don't know who did it, but as the owner of the car, the longer he's missing, the worse it looks for him.
Cross isn't a killer. For the last couple of years, the average number of murders in Baltimore has been over 300, and it's been going up. Mind you, that's only whatever the badges count as official murder, and believe me, there are people that don't count when they die. Wayland? If you're down here, tell me. I'm not talking to the badges, I've been looking for you. They found a body in your trunk. Why? Did you do that? To the left, plain black letters read along the wall. You walked in the corridor. Once that ends, you chose the dark is on the right. My vision goes blurry, flickers black and black and black for longer intervals until I can't see anything at all. I'm not screaming anymore, but my voice echoes back to me. Where the hell am I? You're dead, Josephine. Even smart people do stupid shit sometimes, right?